We have spoken on more than one occasion about the chovah, the obligation and the importance of studying Tanakh. And what I'd like to do now is take the first perek, or most of the first perek of Sefer Tehillim, and give you some insights and some, perhaps this will help each person to develop a methodology and a system, how to learn Tanakh, what to look for, what to understand, how to understand what we see before us. It goes without saying that all the Pesukim of the Tanakh are deep and profound and very concise and very dense in terms of information, ideas. And this is even more so with regards to Sefer Tehillim. Sefer Tehillim, being written almost exclusively in poetic, concise poetic style, is very, very rich and requires much effort and understanding to truly appreciate what is being said by the Pesukim. So, by way of introduction to Sefer Tehillim, what I wrote here is as follows. The first perek discusses two types of people, Risha'im and Tzadikim. Tzadikim as opposed to Risha'im. Risha'im are those who rebel against the laws of Hashem, against the Torah. And the Tzadikim are those who accept the dictates of Hashem, and they accept Malchut Shamayim, they accept the yoke of heaven. What we must understand is that the Bariah, Hashem's creation, was created with rules, with certain principles and essential concepts and laws that underpin the reality of the universe, of the created world. And there are two kinds of laws, two kinds of rules. There are natural physical laws, the reality of gravity, for example, and there are spiritual laws which underpin reality as well. And it's not even true that you can distinguish between the two by saying, well, these we can see with our eyes and these we cannot see with our eyes. Even that's not true. You cannot see gravity. You can be aware of its existence, you can even prove that it exists, but you cannot see it. You can also not see radio waves, but they exist. In the same way, but even more so, the spiritual rules and principles that underpin the Bariah are absolute rules according to which the universe works. They are part of the fabric of reality. There is a physical reality which has its own rules and principles which you cannot controvert. If it's true, I don't know. I'm not in a position to say, but if Einstein is right that nothing can move faster than the speed of light, well, then you can't go beyond the speed of light. And if they prove him wrong one day, then maybe it will be possible. I don't know. We'll wait and see. But you cannot override the rules of nature, correct? And you can also not override the spiritual rules of nature, of the world, of the reality, because those rules are just as real and even more real. And every human being has before him or her has a choice. As it says in the Torah in Sefer Devarim, Perek Lamed, Re'eh notati lefanecha hayom et ha'chayim v'et ha'tov v'et ha'maweth v'et ha'ra'. I am placing before you today life and goodness, or on the other hand, death and evil. But the choice is yours. Hashem doesn't force us to choose one or the other. And the Ramban states over there, this pasuk comes to tell us and the Jewish people that you have a choice. And they can choose the path they wish to follow. There is nothing to force their hand. We have a choice. The individual has a choice, and the Jewish nation has a choice, and we pay for those choices. We either gain by our choices, we benefit, or we are punished, and we reap our just rewards if the choices are the wrong choices. And there's no escaping those ramifications. That is the reality. Just as if you place your hand inside a fire, you'll burn it. There's no way of avoiding that reality. That's the way the world works. The same is true of the spiritual realities. Whatever you do, there is a cause, there is an effect. It's not something that you can necessarily always observe with your eyes immediately. Beyond that, because we have these two concepts in the Torah, Dinei Adam and Dinei Shamayim. We have the judgment of the Beth Din here on earth of human beings, hopefully the right kind of human beings, the kind of Dayanim and Shofatim we spoke of earlier, people that were chosen according to the Torah's instructions, what kind of person qualifies. And you also have Dinei Shamayim, things which are in the hands of heaven. A Beth Din on earth cannot make such decisions. Now, with regards to a human Beth Din, it says in the Talmud, the Masechet Bava Batra, En Dayan Ela Mash Eino Ro'oth. The judge only can see what he sees. He can only be aware of what he was made aware, and he can only judge on that basis. And he has to make that decision in the here and now, based on what he knows today. He doesn't know what's going to be tomorrow, or in 5 years from now, or 500 years from now. He has no way of knowing, and he cannot allow any such consideration. Even if he thinks he does know what will be tomorrow, he can't make the decision based on that. But Hashem sees all of reality, past, present, and future. Yesterday, 1,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, and 500,000 years into the future, all of this is before Hashem. And therefore, Hashem's considerations and calculations are different in essence from anything that we can perceive. We cannot possibly understand such calculations and computations. No human mind could make such calculations. So we see, for example, on earth, we see certain tragedies, certain terrible events. It could be a young child who comes down with cancer. You can't understand why would this such a thing be? And that's a very valid question. If you believe that there has to be an answer that makes sense to you now, because you want an answer now. That's what you want, which is not a bad thing to want, but it's not possible always, because you don't know what the various ramifications and results of this reality that you see now, which is a very tragic one. You don't know how that will impact other people, the parents, the family, other neighbors, other people, tomorrow, a year from now, 10 years from now. You don't know, you can't possibly know. But Hashem can see all of this at one glance. So Dinei Shamayim and Dinei Adam are on two separate planes altogether, and they never intersect. Those are some general ideas which we have to keep in mind. Now, if we look at this first perek more in detail. Asherei haish asher lo halach ba'asat rishayim u'v'derech hatta'im lo amad u'v'moshav l'sloim lo yashav כי אם בתורת אדוני חפשו ובתורתו יחגה יומם ולילה. והיה כעץ שתול על פלגי מים, אשר פריו ייתן בעיתו ועלהו לא ייבול. וכל אשר יעשה יצליח. לא כן הרשעים, כי אם כמוס אשר תדפנו רוח. על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט והטעים בעדת צדיקים. כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים ודרך רשעים תאבד. The only way to really experience this Perek of Tehillim is to go to an authentic Temani shul where everyone, all the participants know how it's done, and they usually do, and they chant this together with a particular chant at a slow speed. It's the most amazing and moving thing to imagine. It's truly stunning. And only the Temanim have preserved such a tradition. I'm not going to try and do it for you now. I could, but I won't. But it's really something to behold. Perhaps you can hear it on YouTube, I don't know. Alright, so Ashereh. The way it is to be pronounced Ashereh, not Ashrei. Ashereh, the shin is a shwa na. This refers, the word Osher means happiness. So the meaning here is how happy, how fortunate, how successful is this man, Ha'ish, or a woman of course. Asher lo halach ba'asat rashaim. The word halach here does not mean walking in the usual sense of to walk, halach, because the shoresh, the root, halach, also often refers to one's usual practice, one's custom, what one is accustomed to do. So Asher lo halach ba'asat rashaim does not mean that who did not walk, literally. We're not talking about walking, we're talking about who does not behave, who does not act, who does not follow this path in life. And even though it's lichora in the past tense, halach, it means to be, it should be understood in the present tense. In other words, eno holech, he doesn't, this is not how he lives his life. The way he lives his life is, he does not follow in the path, he does not go according to the ideas, ba'asat, the word irsa, can also mean advice, but also in this context, it's a better translation, a better explanation is in the according to the ideas of b'shitath rashaim, those who are defined as rashaim. Now, who are these rashaim? What are rashaim? Evil people. Rabbeinu Yosef Ya'abes in his Perush writes as follows: Hem haminim ha'okarim et hakol, ki omerim en Adonai ro'eh othanu arzav Adonai et ha'aretz. The pasuk in Yehezkel. Very beautiful Perush. In other words, and it's generally agreed to by other Mefarshim as well, Rashaim are people who are atheists, or at least very determined agnostics to the extent that we don't take into account this God idea at all. Perfect example in our present point in history is someone like Professor Richard Dawkins of, I think he's from Oxford, as opposed to Cambridge, one or the other, but I think it's Oxford, who of course wrote a well-known book, a bestseller called The God Delusion. Right? God is a delusion. How does he know? Well, he just knows because these people know everything, so obviously God's a delusion. These people make it a central principle of their lives, of their philosophy of life, that there is no God. Or even if you insist that there's some primal cause that somehow brought things into being, he's off busy doing something else now. He's not interested. He couldn't care less what you do. So essentially he doesn't exist. This attitude is also mentioned by the Kuzari, the beginning of the Kuzari, in the name of the Greek philosopher. In other words, these people say there is no God, and even if there is, he's not interested in what goes on here. So basically, do what you like, do what you will. And therefore, what do people do when they're told do as you please? That's the one guaranteed way to elicit the very worst from people. If you tell them you can do what you like, there's no price to pay, there's no morality, it's all a social construct. Morality is a social construct, gender is a social construct, everything's a social construct, it's just in your mind. So whatever you want to do, you do. Whatever you can get away with, you get away with. That's a tremendous recipe for humankind, as you can imagine. Now, this definition of Rasha is not my invention. It's also not the invention of this Parshan or other Parshanim who agree. We find this explicitly in Tehillim, also in Perek Yod in Tehillim. There we find the psukim as follows. It says, Ki Hillel Rasha al ta'awath nafsho, uvosea berech ni'es Adonai, Rasha kerova apor bal yidrosh en Elohim kol mezimotha. He says, there is no God. I can make all my plans and I can do as I please. There's no God. You want some other examples of such people today? No problem. Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, what other names might come to mind? Tony Blair. All the bigwigs, WEF, who want to make sure that we all eat foods made with insect powders, if not the insect themselves, and wish to limit our ability to purchase eggs, meat, fish, cheese. They want to depopulate the planet. This is not, I'm not saying this, that's what they want to do. They say this is what they want to do. It's on their website. You just have to read it. They don't actually hide anything. The Great Reset. The Great Reset means that they want to, they are convinced that there have to be many fewer people on Earth, and those people that remain should not be allowed to travel by air, because that causes pollution, of course. They, of course, will continue to travel to Davos in their private jets. That's fine, that's not a problem. But the rest of us, we will just have to forget about air travel and eat bugs. These people are godless, truly godless, because they have decided there is no God, there's no Hashem. So who's God? We are God. We are the smartest, we're the richest, we're the most conniving. And if we just know how to get our act together, we'll control the world. And that is the biggest Yetzer Hara that exists, to control everybody else. That's bigger than everything else. Money, sex, stuffing your face with the finest French pastries, all that is nothing compared to the ta'awa, the visceral desire to control and rule others.
Like Nimrod.
Yes. So such people, the Rasha here is described explicitly in this pasuk, in Tehillim Perek Yod. A Rasha is a person who says, En Elohim kol mezimothal. There is no God. Whatever my plans are, there's no God to do anything about it. Amar belibo shachach el. He says in his heart, Hashem has forgotten. Even if there is a God, he's busy elsewhere. Winston Churchill once said about his father, his relationship to his father, that his father was like God. He was busy elsewhere. So this God, if he's there, he's not interested. We're not going to have to pay for anything. Histir pano bal ra'a lanesah. He doesn't see, he doesn't know. Alma ni'es rasha Elohim, amar belibo lo tidrosh. Hashem will not demand any cheshbon, any kind of what's the word? Accounting. The Radak also says something similar. He says, "Harashaim hem haredim liknoth mamon v'ta'awath libam ba'olam." Their aim is to amass wealth and get whatever it is that they wish for. They do not discern between good and evil, because there's no such thing. How can there be? Who decided what's good and what's evil? They decide. Whatever they decide is good, that's good. Now the word herdatham should not be misunderstood. Herdatham does not mean their fear, their trembling. It means because of their uncontrollable passion. The word haradah here means overriding violent passion, as I'm about to prove and show you. for wealth, for power, for influence, there's nothing they will not do. Quite literally, there's nothing they will not do. So it's perfectly okay to force billions of people to be injected with untried, untested, so-called vaccines. It's perfectly okay, because what's the worst that can happen? They'll die. So what's the big deal? We need to depopulate the world anyhow. How do I know? It's on their website. It's in their books. It's in their speeches. So what's the problem? It's not immoral. We're saving the planet. That's the most moral thing you could possibly do. We're the most moral people in the world. We want to save the planet. We want to save humanity. So obviously, we're the most righteous people in existence. So the thing to understand about Rashaim is that their ideology is one of kafirah, of denial of Hashem, denial of the Torah, denial of anything divine, and parikat all. In other words, complete unwillingness and inability to accept any kind of law, any kind of limitation on their actions, on their desires, on their plans. So that was the beginning of the pasuk. Ashereh ha'isha shelo halach ba'asat resha'im. Happy and blessed is the man who does not run his life according to these ideologies of these people called the Rasha'im, who deny Hashem and therefore are lawless or ungodly. That's an excellent translation, ungodly. That's how it's translated in the King James Version, you should know, which happens to be an excellent translation. I highly recommend it. It's truly a miraculous translation. It's brilliant. Really. I'm not joking.
You sure?
Absolutely. Well, it includes the New Testament, what have you. I understand that, but as a translation of the Hebrew into English, it's unsurpassed. Unsurpassed. And they translate here ungodly, and it's a very good translation. Uvdarach Hattaim, the Taif is the Husha, there's a dot in the Taif. The reason for that is the word Hattaim does not mean sins, it means sinners. Without a dagesh in the Taif, it would be pronounced Hattaim, and that would be sinners. But if it's with the dagesh in the Taif, then it's Hattaim. The Taif is more pronounced, and that means it doesn't mean sins, it means sinners. People who, as a matter of habit, of course, they sin all their lives because they follow their desires, they follow their yetzer. In other words, they may be less ideologically driven than the Klaus Schwabs and the Bill Gates of this world, and the Richard Dawkins, who will do anything at all as long as you can promise them there's no God, because that's the most important thing. There should be no God. They're not maybe as ideologically driven as these people, but their way of life is to do whatever makes them happy. Again, lo amad doesn't mean he didn't stand. Doesn't mean standing as opposed to sitting. It means he did not spend any time with such people. He doesn't spend any time with such people. Why? So as not to learn from their evil actions, their way of life. Mm-hmm. So says the Radak, and it's a very good perush, because this perek of Tehillim begins with Sur Merah, and then it moves over to Aset Tov. Sur Merah is first turn away from evil doing. First turn away from doing evil, and then turn towards focus on doing good, the right thing. But if you don't do that, don't live your life in that way, then even if you're doing a lot of good, it's like a person who has a bucket. They want to fill up the bucket with water, so they put the bucket under the tap and they fill it up, and there's lots of water rushing in, but there's also a hole in the bottom of the bucket. So no matter how much you fill it up, this bucket's not going to get very full, and even if it gets full, it's going to empty out very soon. So it is if you are involved in doing the wrong thing all the time as a matter of course. Even if you're doing many good things as well, one negates the other. You have to first plug that hole. So we spoke about Roshaim, people who, as a matter of ideology, insist that there's no God and live their lives because in such a way. B, Hatta'im are people who, as a rule, sin because that's what they wish to do. Uvmoshav leslim lo yashav. What are leslim? The word lason, the noun, the noun of leslim is lason. Lason is like the word lashon. Lashon is tongue or speech. Lason is evil, frivolous, empty speech. So les is a person who is habitually speaking and saying empty, worthless, and negative things. And such people also have no shame. They will say anything, they'll speak lashon hara about everybody. Not only will they do it, they exult in doing it. They love doing this. This is what makes them happy. This is what keeps them going. Lashon hara, lesanuth, cynicism. It has to do with speech and with how one spends one's time. The Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra points out that lesim are the opposite of anawim, as we see in the pasuk in Mishlei Perek Gimel. Imla lesim hu yalis, and then the continuation of the pasuk is wala anawim yiten hen. In other words, Hashem will make light of the lesim, but anawim, the opposite of those people, He will grant them. They will find favor in His eyes. Anawim are humble people. A humble person who has shame, why would he speak about other people all the time and say nasty things about them? Why would he sit around and discuss empty things all day long? As the Miri writes here, they spend their days in empty nonsense and talk. They talk about what he said and what that politician wants to do and what this journalist had to say, this is how they spend their lives. In other words, what really motivates them is frivolity, emptiness, and vacuousness. These are the things, as opposed to what? As opposed to serious things, as opposed to Torah, which is something of true value. Now here it says lo yashav, uvmoshav lesim lo yashav. What does lo yashav mean? And again, it's not sitting as opposed to standing. Lo yashav means he didn't spend any time with them. He didn't sit down with them for a minute. In other words, he always avoids their company. He does not want to be in the company of such people. And it states in the Mishnah, and this is the Mishnah here really serves to explain the pasuk. The Mishnah Masechet Avot Perek Gimel states, Rabbi Hanania ben Tardion Omer, Shanaim shayu yoshevim, wa'en b'nehem divrei Torah. If two Jews are sitting together, they're sharing a meal, they sat down to have a cup of coffee and talk a bit together. Wa'en b'nehem divrei Torah, but there's no Torah spoken amongst them. Hareze moshav lesim. That is a moshav lesim. That is a gathering of lesim, of frivolous people, of empty-headed people. Shneimar, as it says in the pasuk of moshav lesim lo yashav, this very pasuk that we're looking at. And Rambam writes in his Perush on this Mishnah, Ra'yato shemoshav lesim nikra kol moshav she'en medabrim bo b'ma'alat haTorah. The proof for what this Mishnah states, that a moshav lesim, a gathering of frivolous, empty-headed, worthless people, is a place where Torah is not discussed at all, is from the continuation from the next pasuk, because the next pasuk says, Ki im b'Torah Adonai hefso, but rather a person who is to be praised and who is going to do well in life is a person b'Torah Adonai hefso. His desire, his wish, his aspiration is to be connected to the Torah, to study the Torah, to be influenced and affected by the Torah. Rambam says, Kilu amar lefi sheyach hefso b'Torat Hashem, because he wants to be connected to the Torah, lo yashab b'moshav leisim. He will not sit. He will not spend any time with these kinds of people, with these leisim, with these frivolous, empty-headed individuals. Why? Because there's no Torah there. So why would you want to be there? It's always, again, important to understand. To do the right thing, you first have to stop doing the wrong thing. You can't be with. You don't spend time with such people. Find someone else to spend time with, or don't spend time with anybody if there's no one to spend time with. As Rambam says in Yichot, De'ot Perek Shishi, if you have to, go live in the desert. If all the people around you are bad. The Gra also quotes the Rambam on this Mishnah. And this pasuk goes on to say, Ki'im b'thorat Adonai hafso, but rather this person, his desire, his aspiration, his true appetite is for what? Is for Torat Hashem. Uv'thoratho yehageh. Again, it's in the lichora. It's in the future tense. Yehageh. He will study. He will dwell upon things to do with the Torah. But again, it doesn't mean in the future. It means this is what he always does. That is the way of verbs in the Tanakh. When speaking about the present tense, the present reality, especially if it's an ongoing reality, it either uses the future or the past to describe an ongoing present, a continuous present. This is what he always does. This is his way. This is his custom. Yomam walayla, as it says in Sefer Yoshua. Lo yamush, Hashem says to Yoshua, the beginning of Sefer Yoshua, Lo yamush Sefer HaTorah zeh mipicha, u'arita bo yomam walayla, lema'an tishmor la'asot kechol ha'katuv bo. So you see, this pasuk in Tehillim is basically quoting from Sefer Yoshua. In other words, whoever wrote this perek in Sefer Tehillim also saw Sefer Yoshua. And what does the pasuk say? What does Yoshua promised? First of all, you have to study Torah all the time, whenever, as much as you can. Lema'an tishmor la'asot kechol ha'katuv bo, so you shall be able to live according to it. And then it goes on to say, and this we will discuss further next time, B'ezrat Hashem. The pasuk goes on to say that Ki az tasliach et dorachecha v'az taskil. Then you shall know and have understanding, and you'll be able to decide on the correct path, and you shall succeed in the various things that you do. We'll stop here for today because there's much more to be said about this perek. As you see, just from these few comments and few things that we've said about these opening pesukim of Sefer Tehillim, the depth. If someone wants to hold on to these, you may. If you don't want to, I'll take them. The depth, the profundity, the precision of the words, of the choice of words. In order to be fully appreciated, one really has to work at it. It's not, you don't get it the first time you read it, not at all. You really have to look into it, and all the mefarshim, etc. So what I try to do here is to summarize some of the major points. There is something else I did want to point out here, which is relevant. It's relevant also to earthquakes. On page 3, it has to do with earthquakes. What is the word for an earthquake in Hebrew? Very good, excellent. But that's not the word they use nowadays. What do people say now? Reidat Adama. Reidat Adama literally is a direct, literal translation of earthquake. It's a quaking, a trembling of the earth. Reidat Adama, earthquake. Why? Because Israelis decided that we don't have a word, of course, for earthquake in Hebrew. And therefore you have to copy the English. You have to take earthquake and translate it into Hebrew. Reidat Adama. But that's nonsense. We do have a word for earthquake in Hebrew in the Tanakh. It's called the Ra'ash. Ra'ash. Now, what does Ra'ash mean? If you ask your average Israeli who knows very little about Hebrew, the more Israeli person is, as a rule, the less Hebrew they understand. It means a noise. Ra'ash is a noise. It's a word that's used all the time in Hebrew to denote a noise. Ra'ash. Which is true. But as we all know, things that tremble, Didn't mean to do that. Things that tremble, that are moving, make a noise, right? So moving, trembling, noise are all connected. So, if you look on this, on page 3 here, on footnote 2, I explain some things to do with these shorashim, these root words in Hebrew. You have the word rasha, which is resh shin ayin, which is very similar to resh ayin shin. It's just a different order. It's the same letters exactly. Rash, rasha, and gash. What's a gash? What's a har gash in Hebrew? A har gash is a volcano, right? Because it's moving, it's erupting. It's not quiet. It's not it's not tranquil. It's not at peace. It's moving. It's doing things. It's active. So what is this shoresh of rasha mean? It means, just like the word rash means za'azua, shaking, trembling, movement, lack of tranquility. In the same way, the evil, because of their actions in this world, they always cause a lack of tranquility. They always cause trembling and problems and strife. And where do we see this? We see this in Psukim explicitly. It says with regards to Shaul HaMelech, when he became king, Vayilahem saviv b'chol oyevo, he began to fight the Jewish people's enemies round about, mainly the Plishtim, right, the Philistines, from whom our great friends, the Philistines, took their name, right? Uvechol asher yifneh yarshia. And what does that mean? Uvechol asher yifneh yarshia. Wherever he turned, he was marshia. What does that mean? In modern Hebrew, harshia means to find guilty in a court. A person's found guilty by a court. You say the court hirshia auto. Okay, which is true. He found him to be a rasha. But that's not what it means here. Shaul was doing battle, was striking, was making raids, military raids and incursions against the Plishtim. Wherever he turned, everything, all his actions were successful. Yarshia, he shook them up. It means he shook them up. He caused them strife and trembling and worry. So as it is explained also by the Mefarshim. Says the reed. In other words, just like a rasha, a real evildoer, he decides he wants the other person's money, so he'll just go up to this person and attack him and shake him up and knock him over maybe and grab his wallet or whatever and run off with it, right? So that's a rasha. That's an act of resha. Resha has to do with, as other Mefarshim explain, yaharid, yavalbel, in other words, to overturn, to cause commotion, to cause lack of tranquility, noise. We have another pasuk in Yeshayahu, Perek Nun Zayin. V'harashaim kayam nigrash. The evil are like the constantly moving, active sea. The sea is never actually on the shore. It's never absolutely quiet and silent. Somewhere, if you go out to sea a little bit, if it happens to be very calm, you can have a very flat sea. True. But on the seashore, it's always moving. It's always the waves are coming in and receding and kicking up sand and dirt and what have you. So the sea is never at rest, not on the seashore. So it says in the pasuk in Yeshayahu that the Rashaim are like kayam nigrash. They are like the sea that is constantly churning over. Ki hashqet lo yucha. They cannot remain at peace. V'yigrashu me'mo refesh wati. Just like the ocean on the seashore, where it meets the land, is constantly churning up sand and whatever it is that's there, and the water is not clear. So the Rashaim are always constantly digging up and causing trouble, and it cannot be quiet. If they're around, they cannot be quiet. Things will not be calm. And that is why Rishaim, we saw before, in this Perek of Tehillim, refers to people who according to it, as it's an ideology, it's their philosophy of life, that there is no God, there's therefore no morality, therefore they do as they please, and therefore they're constantly active in attacking and taking and threatening other people and causing them all kinds of trouble. That's what Rashaim do. They're never at rest. They're constantly searching for more money, more power, etc. Just 1 second. Rav Hirsch also points out interestingly that Rasha is also perhaps similar, related to the Shoresh Rasha with the Hay, which has to do with Rashut, with allowing oneself to do something or being given permission. Laharshoth. In other words, a Rasha is a person who allows himself to do anything he pleases. And that's exactly why an earthquake in the Torah, in the Tanakh, is referred to as a Ra'ash. The earth is shaking and trembling, it's moving, it's not at rest, it's the opposite. The earth is anything but at rest. That's called a Ra'ash. It also does actually, sometimes you can actually hear, when an earthquake occurs, you can actually hear a kind of low hum, grinding sound, as Rambam describes this, for example. The Talmud discusses it. So, but it's all connected again, because sound doesn't come from nothing. Sound comes from something that's moving, that's knocking about, that's coming into contact and moving against something else. So we have these shorashim, garash, which has to do with constant movement, the sea, kayam v'harashaim, kayam Nighrash, Garash has to do with this constant movement and churning. Rasha, Ra'ash, all these things are connected. Gash, all connected. And you will note that in all of these Shorashim, there are 2 letters. Each of the Shorashim have 3 letters, right? Gash is Gimel Ayin Shin, Rasha is Resh Shin Ayin, Ra'ash is Resh Ayin Shin. But what is the common 2 letters that occur in all of them? Resh and Shin, Rash. And it occurred to me that this word, this shoresh, is similar to the English word rush.
Rush.
And if you don't believe me, perhaps you'll believe the Concise Oxford Dictionary, which I quote here. It says, to rush, to flow strongly. Now when something flows strongly, it makes a noise, right? It moves things about. Dash towards in an attempt to attack or capture, right? To rush the enemy, for example, right? Or something like that. Right? Rushing has to do with sound and with violent action. And I think this is probably not by mistake. So you see, from just a few Pesukim in Sefer Tehillim, if one learns it properly, one knows where to look, one can discover the most amazing things. You want? Bakasha.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.